Thank you, Dana. Welcome everyone to today's session on broadband. I'm John Ellis, the Chief Operating Officer for DCA, and I'll be your moderator. In today's session, we're going to learn about the tools and resources available to communities in support of their broadband deployment plans. And you're also going to get to meet members of the Georgia Broadband Deployment Initiative team. So before we get started though with the first speaker, there are a few housekeeping announcements. One is please be sure to keep your mic muted during the presentation. If you have any questions during the session, feel free to type them into the chat. We'll save all of the questions until the end. This session is being recorded and it'll be available after the conference to you and others who are unable to attend today. And you'll receive an evaluation immediately following the presentation. It will also be emailed to you. Please complete it. We value your feedback. So with those items out of the way, I'm going to introduce our first speaker today, Dina Perry. Dina has served as the Executive Director of the Broadband Office at DCA, the Department of Community Affairs, since its inception in 2018. The mission of the program is to provide planning, deployment, and incentives for broadband services and other emerging communications technologies throughout the state. Dina came to DCA from the Northwest Georgia Regional Commission, where she spent more than 3 years working with communities to develop broadband strategies. In this role, she promoted the need to identify broadband assets, drafted policy revisions, and identified funding opportunities. Dina brings 20 years of experience as a broadband advocate. So I'll turn it over to you, Dina.
Thank you, John. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining our session today. As John mentioned, our session will be brought to you by the Georgia Broadband Deployment Initiative team. For some of you who are joining, and this may be the first time that you have an awareness of the Georgia Broadband Deployment Initiative, 2018, the Georgia General Assembly passed Senate Bill 402, Achieving Connectivity Where Act, which set the implementation of the Georgia Broadband Deployment Initiative. Since the implementation in a couple of years ago, we have been developing tools to assist communities that will support and enable broadband initiative in those communities. During this session, we want to share those tools and the technical assistance available through the Georgia Broadband Deployment team. But first, I want to introduce the team. As I said, and as John introduced, I'm Dina Perry, and I have been in the role since the office was established in 2018. I lead the coordinating efforts for the initiative and the implementation. Members of the core team are also Bill Price, who is with the Georgia Technology Authority, and then also Eric McRae. Bill is a IT strategist and senior strategy analysis for Georgia Technology Authority. He has been a key member in implementing the GBDI and provides subject matter expertise and technical support. Eric McRae is with the Carl Vinson Institute at University of Georgia. He is our expertise in providing data and mapping. It has been his team that, and his GIS team that has helped in developing the Georgia Broadband Availability Map. The three of us have been working hand in hand and in partnership since inception. We continue to work together in exploring ways that we can maximize the tools and provide technical assistance to communities. And it has never been more apparent for the need of connectivity than it has in the last 6 months as a result of COVID. Next slide, please.
Where's my mute button?
Beyond our core team, we have a much broader team, and it's our partners and our advisors who have also been critical in developing the resources, identifying resources, assisting us, bringing ideas, collaborating with us. Key members are the Georgia Department of Economic Development, State Properties Commission, Department of Transportation, and as I've already mentioned, Georgia Technology Authority and CVIPD. Additional members that that is just imperative that I mention is also the Department of Education and the Governor's Office of Student Achievement. We have been working hand in hand with them since March on identifying and addressing the connectivity and devices need that is now been brought to our attention even more so with COVID, and trying to offer solutions and support connectivity needs and supporting remote learning in response to COVID. Next slide, please. So, as John mentioned, the mission of GBDI is to promote and incent the deployment of broadband services to unserved areas. So, one of the critical things that we recognized right away and was part of the legislation is identifying where those needs exist, so that we can better understand where we can find solutions and address and deploy services to those unserved areas. Why is it important? Over 1 million Georgians lack access to high-speed internet. As we all know, it's critical infrastructure for the 21st century. Broadband is essential for businesses, education, healthcare, access and jobs, really the whole economic ecosystem. There are many advantages of being connected to broadband services, and as I mentioned before, never has there been a time that has illustrated this more than during the COVID-19 pandemic. All across Georgia, many citizens have been forced to work from home and transitioning to remote learning in order to protect their health as well as the safety of others. This is a problem that we always knew exists, but certainly COVID has highlighted that. Look at us today. I mean, typically DCA would be holding these conferences in person, and we would be able to see each other, network with each other, interact with each other. But today we have transitioned to virtual webinars, teleworking, becoming more and more familiar with what are those online platforms so that we conduct meetings, whether it's Zoom, whether it's Teams, whether it's GoToTraining. Some of us are very fortunate that we have that connectivity that can support those platforms, but there are many who do not. And so I think about the struggle of what that may have brought to them, not only from teleworking, but if you had children at home who were remote learning and lacking the ability to have that connectivity so that you could do the digital learning. I know for me personally, I have struggled during this time because my bandwidth at different times did not have the ability to support all of the connectivity needs that were going on in my home at the same time. So many times I'm not able to use my video camera because it requires too much bandwidth for me to be able to have an audio and a video conference meeting, as well as all the other members of my family being able to utilize the internet at the same time. So I think about, all the various ways and connectivity needs, the benefits, and then the struggles that do not have access. So it's very timely that we were in the process of developing these tools to support communities, because more than ever, the need for communities to prosper, but not only to prosper, but to act and respond to where we're at in today's times, as I mentioned earlier. So we have put together a core team. We have been working diligently to come up with resources that we can support community efforts as you look at your needs and want to deploy services, and how might we assist you. We have come up with several resources and tools and technical expertise that we want to share with you today. And at this time, I want to bring Bill Price in to talk about the technical expertise, the technical services, some of the other things that we have been doing, and he can share it with you. Bill, thank you for joining us today, and at this time I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Dina. Am I unmuted? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you very much. First, I want to say thank you to Commissioner Nunn and Dina, who have done an incredible job organizing resources, people, and tools and funding across multiple state agencies, the university system, and a number of private sector consulting firms who have expertise in different aspects of broadband. So where we are today is that we have this expanded team of people and resources that's available to local government. And today, Eric is going to take you through some examples. I mean, everybody has been very busy since the passage of the legislation, doing a lot of analysis, building the broadband maps, working with all the broadband service providers, increasingly becoming more coordinated and integrated. And like Dina said, with COVID-19 and education, the student needs, it has really tested out our ability to provide a lot of accurate and granular information and analysis to support DOE and the school districts and ultimately the students. So this screen here just gives you a snapshot that when it comes to if you're in a community and you want to do something about improving broadband availability, this gives you an idea of the kinds of expertise that the members of the GBDI team represent. Everything from infrastructure and technology to market assessments and data analysis and mapping and procurement and contracts. One thing Georgia Technology Authority is very good at is technology RFPs and procurements and contracts, for example, and developing public-private partnerships with private sector firms. Eric and his team and others have built a number and acquired a number of tools that would be very powerful for us to support you, doing cost modeling to determine costs, knowing exactly where the unserved locations are, having a full understanding of wireless options, which there are a number of them out there right now. And I guess one last point I wanted to make was that when should you engage us? Well, the perfect world would be you engage us prior to you've actually gone out and passed a bond issue or done a SPLOST fund and you have a chunk of money and you're just trying to figure out how to best use the money that you've raised. It would be best if you reach out to DCA and Dina's team and then engage us in advance of going that far, because we can help you qualify and quantify what the options are to achieve your goal and what those costs would look like from a budgeting or a funding pursuit request. So we stand ready to support you guys and look forward to helping. And Dina, I think that's it for me.
Thank you, Bill. Next slide, please. One of the tools that we have been working on developing in the last 2 years is the state broadband availability map. A lot of work and effort has gone into this. Georgia Technology Authority with Bill Price's leadership, Carl Vinson Institute with their GIS expertise. This would not have been possible without their involvement, but it also wouldn't have been possible without the participation of over 40 retail service providers in the state. Without their information and their data, it would not have been possible for us to identify where is unserved as well as the served. In June, we published the map. We finalized our first version. It is now on our website. This is one tool that we think is very valuable. We have just begun to understand what the information and the data behind it can support. I'm going to, since Eric and his team and all his expertise are the ones that have put this map together, I'm going to hand it off to Eric McRae now with CVIOG to walk us through our recently published map.
Thank you, Dina. So what you're looking at here is a map that we published, as Dina said, on June 30th, 2020. And this is showing a comparison of what the FCC collects. And it's important to note that the FCC, when they collect information, they collect it at a census block level. And at a census block, if a single location is provided to, that entire census block is considered to be served. Whereas in Georgia, we've identified that if more than 20% of the individuals in a census block do not have access to broadband. That census block is considered unserved. And so, Brittany, if you'd slide that all the way back over to the left real quick, what you can see here in orange is those areas that the FCC say are served, and those areas that are in yellow are the areas that they say are unserved. As she swipes across this map, you'll see that there's a lot more yellow showing up per what Georgia says is unserved. And so we have a very detailed look at where we have service and where we don't have service. And it's also important to note that we define service as being 25 megs down and 3 megs up. And so that is what we're defining as broadband. Now, all this map does is show you a comparison of the two. If we'd like to go to the GBDI unserved by county, we can see a little bit more detailed information. And on this map here, it brings up a state of Georgia map, and we can select any county that we want and zoom to that county. When we do that, we see that we have a total of 2,768 unserved locations, 2,599 served locations, and a total percent unserved is 52%. As we continue to zoom in on this map, and if you want to zoom on in, go a little further. Now, if we click on one of the census blocks, we can actually get details for that census block. So we can see that this census block is unserved. There's a total of 3 locations in the census block, and they're all unserved. And there's no served locations in that census block. So this is 100% unserved. And we have that for both served and unserved. We have the total numbers. Can you define unserved? Is that a household? A location on this map is either a household, is residential, it's a business, or it's an other. An other might be a church or something like that, a nonprofit organization. So all 3 of these are locations that we're capturing and mapping against. If you want to go, maybe Brittany, to the unserved Georgia map. And so we've also built a set of maps that allow you to go in and search by different geographies. So an example would be if I want to query and say, I want to find a Georgia House District. I can select just about any House District that I want, go in there, select it, and when I click that and I hit apply, it'll take me to that House District. This happens to be an Atlanta House District, and it's pretty much so completely served. There's a total of 29 unserved locations in this district, but for the most part, we have 21,000 plus served locations. So, but we have it broke down by Georgia House District, Georgia Senate District, U.S. Congressional District, as well as county. In addition to this, we also have a map that shows the free public Wi-Fi for the entire state. And this is a map that was put together right as the pandemic started. It was recognized very quickly that there were a lot of kids that were being sent home to basically learn at home through virtual classes and things like that, but did not have access to broadband. And so we wanted to help identify resources around the state. And so working with DOE, the library systems, DCA, and a whole bunch of other people, DCA put this map together right here that shows the different Wi-Fi locations around the state. And so these are all known to be free Wi-Fi locations, and this just is another asset that we have available to folks through the broadband website. I think we can go back to the presentation now, Brittany. So overall, broadband, at a very high level. What we found doing this project is there are 507,341 locations, and that'll be homes and businesses that lack access to broadband, and that'll be access at a 25.3 or greater speed. 70% of all the unserved locations in the state of Georgia are in rural counties, and that equates to 31% of rural Georgia is unserved. And there are 26 counties in the state of Georgia that have greater than 50% of their locations unserved. And there are a handful of them that are even higher than that, but there are 26 that are more than half those locations are unserved. Next. So in addition to having these maps, which were available, which are basically you just use them right from the website, on the Maps tab, there is a section where you can actually download the data. So if you want to get the data at a census block level, you can either consume this data through a web mapping service, which allows you to bring it into your own GIS software or put it up on the web if you're using it in some other way. We also have the data available as a shapefile and also as a CSV, which is an Excel type format that you can just put into any type of database or data processing program to allow you to basically take a deeper look at the data. And all that is available. And we'll release, when we release the new map in 2021, we'll update these as well. Next. So some examples of some tools, if you were to work with us and come to us and say, hey, we've got a project we're thinking about, would be looking at the unserved locations by census block, but where we take a little bit deeper look at it versus it being a yes, no, is it served or unserved, we can actually show the total number of unserved locations in a census block. And so as this map shows here, this is Oglethorpe County, which was the first county to actually go through and become a I can't remember the exact term, but it was the broadband certified county or whatever, broadband rated community. This county has a large number in the northwest quarter of the county of unserved locations. There are other areas in the county that are unserved as well, but by far the vast majority of them in the northwest portion of the county. And this just helps guide you in and zero you in where there might be issues and problems and where you might be able to get your best bang for the buck if, let's say, you were to build out in that county. Next slide. Another example of a tool that we have is, and this goes back to what we were talking about earlier. If you come and talk to us, right as the pandemic started, there was an issue with the Department of Education, obviously, all the kids going home, knowing where the kids were at that did not have access to broadband in their home. And so we worked with the Department of Education to get a student address for every single student. We mapped all those students out, and then we were able to map that against the information we'd already collected. And so we have, for the entire universe of students in the state, K through 12, whether or not they're served or unserved. And once again, this is an Oglethorpe County example, but we were able to see that there were 630 unserved students in Oglethorpe County. There were a total of 379 unserved locations, and that would be households. We also had, because we had a handful of providers that provided us information, whether or not they had 10.1 available, 10 megs down, 1 up, we were able to identify those students that had access to 10.1. Now, access does not mean that they're subscribed. All that means is that the service is there and they have the ability to subscribe, but they can afford it. And so we were able to do that for the entire state. And we actually had about 4 or 5 counties where better than 90% of all the students did not have access to broadband. And so it's a very shocking statistic. Next. Another tool that we have available to us, and if you would work with us, we have this information that we can help guide, is a cost per unit tool. We've done cost analysis for the entire state, working with some providers or working with some private sector individuals that do cost modeling for the federal government and other groups. And so we actually have cost models that we have that we can apply to all the data that we have at a census block level, so we can actually see where it's going to be the most cost effective, where it's going to cost the most, where it's going to cost the least. And in this example, as you're in dark green going to dark red, it's least cost in dark green, most cost in dark red. So you can kind of start to see those areas of the county which are going to be the most cost prohibitive when you're building out versus those areas in the county which it's going to be most cost effective. And that doesn't necessarily mean that all areas wouldn't get served. It's something to be mindful of when you're actually going through and building out a network or doing whatever you're trying to do, having that information at your fingertips makes a difference. Next slide. Another thing that we've launched was a Ookla speed test. And what we did is we partnered with Ookla. We actually have Ookla data for the state, both the cellular information as well as the wired information. Basically, whenever you take a speed test, that information is recorded. We have all that information, whether it's from the phone or from a wired network or wireless network. We have all that information. We have access to that data. We also set up so that within the broadband website, we actually have a speed test as well. That speed test gives us the ability to actually track any speed test that was taken via our website. So hopefully we're seeing very Georgia-centric test in that. And as we make pushes, let's say with the Department of Education and other groups to push folks to go out and take the speed test, when we collect that data, we don't have all the other information out there. It's just those things that we're trying to do a push for. So that speed test is available for anyone who'd like to take that, and we encourage you that you take that as often as you'd like. Next slide. I'm going to turn this back over to Dina and let her take it from here.
Thank you, Eric. So as you can see, we have a lot of data and information that we can use as a result of our mapping, and it can be looked at in many different ways. It can be layered with a lot of different data so that we can do an analysis looking at it from many directions. But one of the other things that was part of the programs and the tools that we set up was a broadband ready designation and a broadband ready site designation, as well as a requirement which was in legislation that comprehensive plans include a broadband element. And we get a lot of questions about what does a broadband element look like. So part of a way to illustrate that would be when a community has looked at what their needs are, and it starts with leadership. It starts with having a community leader and a champion who recognizes the need for connectivity in parts of your community or all of your community in order for that community to prosper. When you have the leadership, then you begin developing who might be your stakeholders. And your stakeholders, in a lot of cases, are obvious. I mean, it's your education partners, it's your small businesses, it's your large businesses, it's local government. But it's also it also can be those who are in the private sector delivering services already in that community. They could be a partner where you can understand where you might leverage assets and work together and do some sort of cost sharing. But primarily on the broadband element piece in a comprehensive plan, it's just to demonstrate that the community recognizes that there is a need in the community or in the county for connectivity and the need for connectivity and deployment of those services to those portions of the county or community or city. And illustrates that there has been a local effort in trying to address these needs, identifying what assets you may have contributed, and these are just some things that you might include in your comprehensive plan. To date, we have 216 communities that have adopted the comprehensive plan. If you have questions regarding what are some examples or what other counties have done, you can reach out to our office, Brittany Hickam. You can also talk with our planning. And they can help you understand what it is that would meet the requirements of a broadband element. We've also had 10 communities across the year that have been designated as broadband communities. This makes up both counties and cities. As Eric mentioned, Oglethorpe County was our first broadband ready designated community. The broadband ready designation community illustrates that a community is expansion ready, meaning that they have adopted the comprehensive plan or have a updated comprehensive plan that includes the broadband element, but has also adopted an ordinance that is expansion ready, that is provider friendly, meaning that you are streamlining those processes. You have a timetable in which those permits will be delivered, and just illustrates that you are a provider friendly community. As I mentioned, and as Eric mentioned, Oglethorpe County was our first designated community, and they do a great job and a great example of illustrating all the things that I had mentioned. They started with a champion and leadership of the development authority and working with the local elected officials, the county commissioners, led by Amy Stone, and then identifying and recognizing where in parts of their county had the highest concentrated area. How do you develop a strategy plan to maximize investment? They looked within their resources and offered a small or significant match, really, because it did attract providers. And then they did an RFP, and now they are underway with building out a wireless network in the area of the county that Eric had illustrated in his earlier slide that had the highest number of unserved. So they're a great example of they had a champion, they had a leadership, they had an advisory committee made up of stakeholders. They looked to identify who the public-private partnerships they could engage with. They identified what kind of assets that they may leverage, and sometimes that may be some sort of match to incent a provider investment. And now they're well underway to offer a wireless service in that area of their county. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the broadband community and site designations, I mentioned a little bit what it means to become a broadband ready community, which is to illustrate your expansion ready with the adoption of a model ordinance, an adoption of a local comprehensive plan inclusive of the broadband service element. Just to illustrate that you are expansion ready, you're inviting solutions, you're inviting partners, and you're looking perhaps to public-private partnerships. We do think one of the key strategies to identifying solutions is the public-private partnership, because you can maximize investment, minimize the risk when you engage and do a public-private partnership. So we do think that that is one of the key strategies in identifying solutions. The site designation is where you have a property or you have a facility that there is already a gig service, high-speed internet at the premise, and this property or facility can be promoted by the Department of Economic Development for those type businesses who need high-speed internet to support whatever their business delivery may be. And so this is an economic development tool. This is an asset that can be promoted. These site designations, that program, we do work hand in hand with the Georgia Department of Economic Development. You can apply for the site designation through DCA, but it's with the Department of Economic Development that we work in partnership with those selections. And it is the Department of Economic Development that will begin promoting those when those facilities or properties have received the site designation. Next slide, please. So this is to tell a story of in the last 9 months to a year, some of the success stories we've had in broadband investment. We've had 4 successful USDA applications who have received Reconnect funding. In round 1, there was 3, and in round 2, there has been 1. These applications and the success stories in these represent private service providers applying for these funds, but also having community support around it. Through these investments, we've had over 24,000 households to be served, 72 businesses served. In addition to the Reconnect funding, there was also private investment working in partnership with the community. Oglethorpe County is an example of that, where they invested local funds and invested with a private partner. Tallapoosa, Haralson County has seen the same success in being creative in what their match was, where they looked at tax incentives in order to incent a private partner, Comcast, to partner with them to bring services to the Tallapoosa area. So every situation is case by case. There is no silver bullet. There is no one size fits all. You look at your community and see what your assets are and see what you can bring to the table. And one of the things that I have heard from all of these communities who are making a difference is persistency. And, you know, that comes from your champion and that comes from the leadership. So in a nutshell, what can DCA and the Georgia Broadband Deployment Initiative team do? Through our mapping, we can help you identify where those areas of need are. But behind the mapping that we have published, we can help you do a data analysis to help direct investment. How do you prioritize your investment? Let's say you are a community who has raised funds. How can you best leverage and get the maximum value out of those dollars? We can help do an analysis behind the scenes on the cost of the investment and where you can reach the highest number of unserved. We also can work with you in helping you identify funding sources through USDA, EDA. For those counties who are eligible for ARC or Appalachian Regional Commission funds, we can help you with that. We can help you identify other funding sources. We can share best practices with you on what other communities are doing around local funding, whether they're looking at bonds, whether they're looking at SPLOST, or in the case of the example I gave, tax incentives. We can also help you identify who the partners are. In the through the mapping effort, we have developed relationships with these private sector partners, internet service providers, in all the counties, and know who currently service those areas. So we can help you identify who a potential partner may be. So we can bring to you a number of resources. We can help you understand technology. As I mentioned, there's not a one size fits all. Some also include wireless and wireline. Who are those partners? What technology may be better fitted for your area? We can offer those kind of expertise. And then we also have a resource of experts in designing networks. So what's best suited? Can we introduce you to those expertise that offer engineering and consulting in that area? So these are some resources that we think would benefit communities, and we are very anxious and excited to offer these to you and stand willing and able to help you. You can find a lot of this information online on our website. You can find how to apply for and the application for the broadband ready designations, both the site and the community. You can find the speed test, and we will continue to update and offer resources around funding opportunities. If you need support from any of our team members that were on the call today, Bill or Eric, you can contact DCA through the information on the screen. We do have a email specific to local government assistance. That is the first email on the screen. It is local government GBDI support@dca.ga.gov. You can also contact Brittany Hickam or Jason Sale And for any questions around the comprehensive planning, you can contact our planning department. I would like to ask Bill or Eric if either of them would like to offer any additional information before we go into questions.
No, Dina, not for me.
I'm good at this point, Dina.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Thank you, Eric. Okay, so at this time, we'll open it up for any questions, looking in the chat box to see what kind of questions we have.
So Dina, the first thing I see is from Callie Smith. Can you define, lost my spot, unserved location? Is that a household, or can you just describe unserved location and define it a little bit more for everyone?
A location is a household or a business. So
and it
it's
can also be
go
other
ahead.
elements such it can also be other elements such as a church or other nonprofit, which isn't necessarily considered a business, might be a governmental building, but it's a single addressable location in the state.
Okay. It looks like Bill is taking care of some of the questions as we move along, so thank you, Bill, for that. I keep losing my spot. Gretchen, I see your question, and I can reach out to you about that specifically if that's okay with you. From Mark Beatty, if a local government is lacking a public access point to connect to wireless internet and would, oh, Bill, you've taken care of him. Bill, you are on it today. On the unserved map by county, what are the GBDI petitions?
I can take this, Dina.
Thank you.
So when the process by which that we map this information is we had the providers provide their data to us, and when we got that data originally from the providers, it was either an address list, a footprint of their service area, or some other representation of the area in which they serve or the locations in which they serve. We then mapped all that information against the data that we had. We provided that information back to the providers, and then we gave them an opportunity of about 30 to 45 days to go through a QA/QC, do basically confirm that the data that we had found and what we had mapped was accurate. That's the start of that process started right as the pandemic hit, and so several of the providers didn't have an opportunity to get to that. But the last way that we had for the providers to go through and confirm their data was we put in a process after the map was published, they had the option to or opportunity to petition to have a map change made. And so we worked with, we had just the one provider that had went through the petition process, and we've on the map the representation that shows that area in which they're petitioning to say we want to have a map change in this area. And for the most part, what that footprint is showing is they had originally submitted an address list to us, but they're now moving to a footprint, and they actually are serving a larger area. And those changes will be incorporated into the map that is released on June 30th, 2021.
I think that concludes the majority of the questions that have not been answered yet. Mayor Ledbetter, I see you on here. I'm glad you were able to use the speed test, and we thank you for your help in the past too. There's a
right. Brittany, there's Greg Bolke has a question. He says, yesterday Joni discussed CDBG CV funding, and broadband was identified as an eligible use of funding. Who would the eligible applicants be? And if a private entity is looking to partner, must that funding be provided via loan, or are there grant opportunities available?
This is Dina. The CDBG program, CV, as Joni indicated, it is eligible for broadband services. An eligible applicant would be a local government that could partner with a private provider. And so that project would look much like those public-private partnerships that we've talked about throughout the presentation, and that we have worked with since the inception of GBDI. So as the CBDG funds become available to communities and they look to use it for broadband services, that would look much like where they would receive the funding and they would partner with a private sector, if that's their desire, to deploy the services. And they could use all of the tools that we have named, identifying where the unserved are, what the investment cost would be, identifying the private partner, utilizing our expertise around what technology might be considered for that area. Different solutions are more appropriate for others based on cost and terrain. I do want to give Mayor Better a shout out because they too was a broadband ready community, designated community, and they decided to do a wireless project that the city of Woodbury manages and operates, and they've had great success with that. They were able to partner with Charter so that Charter supports their fiber connection to support the wireless network. So that's another example of a success story and best practices, and that lessons can be learned. Bill, do you have anything to add?
I'm sorry, I was doing a chat response. What was the question?
I'm sorry. I thought someone was trying to provide some response to that question, so I thought it might have been you.
I was responding to the question, can local government become an ISP or do broadband? And the answer is yes, they can, and there are examples.
Okay, thank you for that answer. I see it now in the chat box. Yes, they can, and there are examples, as Bill indicated in his response, of those that are doing it in the state.
Are there any other questions from the attendees? I don't think we've missed any more.
Through the contact information that we have on the screen, you're welcome to continue sending questions to those emails if they come up and you would like some clarification or answers or anything that you may want assistance from our team. Please feel free to email us, and we will respond by email, set up meetings and phone conferences so that we can talk and explore options and discuss further some of the resources that we've made available. And if there are no other questions, again, I want to thank everyone for being on the call today. I hope it was informative. I want to thank Bill and Eric and Georgia Technology Authority and the Carl Vinson Institute. They have been terrific partners, and their resources have been invaluable. And we will continue collectively through our agencies and other agencies to bring resources to find solutions and assist communities and support the communities, enabling all of you in your efforts to bring solutions in your county or city.
Thank you, Dina. This is John Ellis. We'll conclude the session now, and just a reminder, you'll get an email asking for your evaluation. We look forward to your feedback. Everybody have a great afternoon.